Hello, my name's Gavin Smith. I'm a writer. I wrote Veteran War in Heaven, the Age of Scorpio trilogy, and the Bastard Legion books, amongst others. Most recently, I did the novelization of the film Bloodshot. I hope everybody out there watching this is as well as can be expected given the situation. I hope you're all looking after yourselves as much as you can. And and so I've got some. Could you just excuse me a moment? Hold on, I'll be right back. So anyway, I've got a couple of questions here, which I'm going to answer, and then I am going to be doing a reading. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the time being. So first of all, where in the world are you? I am in my office in Surrey, just outside of London. Next question we have is, how have you been coping with the isolation? Fine, I guess. Like everybody, there's kind of anything you do is accompanied by a sort of feeling of anxiety, sort of low-level anxiety that's always there. You know, you worry about your friends, worry about your loved ones. I'm very much in awe of all the key workers here. It struck me yesterday just how incredibly brave bin men are at the moment. But yeah, I guess I've been inconvenienced. We've got it a lot easier here than many other folks. Both myself and my partner are able to work from home, so we don't have to worry about our jobs and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it could be a lot worse than it is for us anyway. What am I reading at the moment? I am currently reading Making Wolf by Tate Thompson, which is his, I believe, his first crime novel, and it's excellent. It's a really, really good book, and I'm still waiting for the instructions on how to actually make a wolf, but I'm halfway through, so I can only assume that that is coming. What am I writing at the moment? I am currently early doors on doing research for a spec novel. I'm not quite sure yet what genre it's going to be. At the moment, it's just a story, but that's where I am at the moment. I've got some other bits and pieces in the work, but they're all in various stages, waiting to go out to market. So that's where I am at the moment. Where do I write? I write here. This is my office, and it's a mess at the moment because I'm spending a great deal of time in here because working both my day job and doing the writing, doing studying, and what have you in here. So you're not getting a tour at the moment. One thing that has happened is that I have to have meetings, with directors at work, with students, with other faculty members, and you sort of have a look at the backdrop of everywhere where they're calling you from, and then I look at my backdrop and there's a cabinet full of action figures. You're left with the feeling that everybody else you're speaking to is an adult except you, but I guess that's all right. So anyway, I asked, because I knew I was doing this today, I asked on Twitter for some questions. I've got them up here, so if you're wondering where my eyeline is going, that's the answer. I'm going to do my best to answer them. So the first question comes from Lee Murphy of the City of Greyhawk. If you could give a character a completely useless superpower, what would it be? I have to say this question completely and totally stumped me. I would always be looking to give somebody a useful superpower. I guess I don't know, the ability to do drum solos with their eyelids, that kind of appeals to me. It would be a little bit off-putting. It might be difficult to work into a story, but it sounds sort of fun. Next up was a question from Jeremy Zal, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, of Australia Land. Now, I shall read this question verbatim. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized sheep or 10 sheep-sized sucks? Now, I don't know what a sheep-sized suck is, but it sounds kind of horrible. Perhaps it's some kind of desperately poisonous Australian fauna. So I think I would rather fight 100 duck-sized sheep, because I at least know what a duck and a sheep is. Stephen Deas from the internet, he asks, what does the advice "start your story as late as possible" actually mean? Now, given that Stephen has been a published writer longer than I have, I sort of assume that he knows the answer to this and he's just kind of testing me. So basically, start your story as late as possible. It has more to do with screenwriting, and there can be problems taking advice from screenwriting into writing prose, as I had to discover the hard way. But when you're writing a screen, you don't really want to tell the audience any more information than they absolutely need. So if something is happening, there's a question of how late you can bring them into that particular scene. So it doesn't have to start at the beginning of the event. It can start halfway through the event, and you can drop your characters into it. And the audience rather can work out what's happening just from what's going on the screen. If you don't tell the audience everything, it keeps them engaged because they're working out what's going on, which is actually one of the pleasures of stories in general. So I hope that answers that question. Alexandra Peel from the parish of Twitter. How much research did you do for the Bastard Legion? And she sort of follows that up with tech, weaponry, ships, etc. So for those particular things, tech, weaponry, ships, and what have you, that tended to, I didn't do much in the way of specific research for those things. They were kind of an amalgamation of stuff that I've cobbled from various different sources over the years. What I was more likely to do research on was things like psychopathology for the main character Miska, the prison system in various different countries for all the prisoners, and crime, just in general information about crime, criminals, organized crime, that kind of thing. Again, for the characters in that. So yeah, that's there it is. I'm going to do a reading for you. I'm going to read. I'm going to read from one of my books, which I think came out early 2018, I believe it came out. It's called Special Purposes First Strike. First Strike Weapon, sorry, don't even know the name of my own books. And it came out with the publisher Baden, and which is part of the Rebellion group, and it's one of my lesser known books. It was, however, a great deal of fun to write, and yeah, I very much enjoyed writing it. So I thought I would share that with you. That it subsequently occurs to me that it might not be the best to share at the moment, because it has not one but two apocalypses in it going on at the same time. But you know, I don't always choose wisely, but I am committed. So anyway, I'm not the best at reading, so do please bear with me. So, chapter 1. 1604 Eastern Standard Time, 16th of November 1987, Grand Central Station, New York City. The screaming was more distant now, and the gunfire had stopped. Captain Vadim Skorlensky had blood on his face and meat in his mouth. He spat out the gobbets of raw flesh and tried not to look at them. He held his Stechkin pistol loosely in his right hand and looked across the Park Avenue viaduct over 42nd Street towards the dark mouth of the Park Avenue tunnel. At his back was the colonnaded frontage of the huge square neoclassical building that was Grand Central Station. Ancient Roman imperialism, complete with statues of Hercules, Minerva, and Mercury, reimagined in the early 20th century and transplanted to America. It was dark now, or as dark as it seemed to get in this city. The tall buildings running down either side of the viaduct were well lit. Focusing on them, it was easy to believe that nothing was happening. They provided a counterpoint to the wreckage spread out in front of him. The bullet-riddled police cars and yellow cabs, the emergency services unit SWAT van on its roof, cars crushed underneath it where the RPG had flipped it into the air, and the burning wreckage of an NYPD helicopter. Everywhere, a carpet of empty shell casings and so much blood on the ground, but so few bodies. Other than the distant screaming echoing through the concrete and glass canyons, the only other sounds were the steady drip of blood and tinny music coming from someone's transistor radio. The insipid American teen singing about how they were alone now contrasted obscenely with what they'd done, the crime he'd helped commit. Vadim had thought himself a monster. He believed he had come to terms with it. Now he realized he'd never really known what a monster was. It had been a long time since Vadim had felt capable of weeping, and now the tears could not come. He was not as he had been. Instead, he started to laugh until the laughter became dry, painful sob. Or it would have been painful if pain were something he still felt. He had no idea how he'd ended up in front of Grand Central Station. He was missing time, and his face was covered in someone else's blood. The last thing he remembered was being in the lower levels among the platforms, looking for a way out for his squad. He had turned to find a terrified New York Transit police officer raising his revolver. He had been little more than a boy. Vadim hadn't been able to bring up his AK-74 quickly enough. The police officer had just been doing his job, protecting the passengers on the platform. For some reason, Vadim found this comforting. He hoped the boy and the passengers had lived, though he knew it was unlikely. He saw the bright light first. He closed his eyes and it shone through his eyelid, but not bright enough to damage his retinas permanently, assuming that was still an issue. They hadn't targeted New York itself. The detonation had been to the west somewhere. Another bright light followed a moment later. The oil refineries in New Jersey, maybe. The high-rise canyons of New York protected Vadim from the worst of the skin-burning flash. The white light turned the city into a photographic negative for a moment. Then another flash from the south, and he knew that Philadelphia had gone. The ground in the mighty buildings shook. The road over the viaduct cracked. The firestorm had blown itself out by the time it had reached Manhattan Island, leaving only hot, radioactive winds to howl through the artificial canyons. Fools, he tried to say to himself. His voice sounded dry, like the crack of wood snapping in a fire. It didn't sound like him anymore. He wondered if he stood up and looked to the west, he would see mushroom clouds. Lights in the surrounding buildings winked out. but he could still hear the tinny American pop music. The electromagnetic pulse had apparently not reached Manhattan. Presumably it had taken out a facility that supplied power to the city. Lights flickered on in some of the surrounding buildings as emergency power kicked in. Some of the light was red, which seemed appropriate to Vadim for a number of reasons. He almost started laughing again, but he knew that if he did, he wouldn't stop until he put the Stechkin to his head and blew his brains out. Even then, he wasn't sure that would stop him now. He felt cold. No, that wasn't true. He didn't really feel anything. He knew he was cold. He couldn't feel his heart beating, his chest rising and falling. He couldn't even feel his wounds. The only thing he felt was the hunger, the need to hunt, to feed. It was all encompassing. It took everything he had to remain sitting there, not to answer the hunger's call, not to let go of himself. He wondered if he'd still be there, locked in behind his eyes, witness to atrocities at a new level. He suspected, however, that it would be a sweet release from the war inside himself. He had to do the right thing. Just for once, he thought. He tasted the Stechkin's barrel, felt it grind against his teeth as he angled it up. He started to squeeze the trigger, watched the hammer click back. Then he saw her. The Fräulein, his massively built East German second in command, Sergeant Liesl-Sauer of the East German Army, who had been transferred to the Spetsnaz company he now commanded. After Skull, the Fräulein had been with him the longest. She was moving between the bullet-riddled police cars among the flames, covered in blood. Some of it was undoubtedly hers, but the blood on her face probably wasn't. Vadim had no idea why he was still in control of his body, still sentient, but he owed it to the Fräulein to put her out of her misery before seeing to himself. He stood up and made his way across the viaduct towards her. The Fräulein's head twitched round to look at him as soon as he moved. Vadim raised the pistol as he approached. She was staring at him. He needed to get close. He had no idea where his rifle was, and he had to shoot her in the head at least twice to make sure she was at peace before he followed. She waited for him, her flat, brutish face lit by the orange flickering flame of the burning helicopter. Then he saw it in her eyes. Recognition, intelligence. Lisa was still in there somewhere. Vadim? A Ukrainian accented voice asked him from behind. Chapter 2, 0452, Afghanistan time, 6th of November, 1987, northeastern Badakhshan province, Afghanistan. The village was burning, and the Spaniard was dead. And that's the end of the reading. That's the first chapter and first line from Special Purposes, First Strike Weapon. I'm pretty much going to leave it there for today. I'm going to wish everybody the best out there. And again, look after yourselves. And I will hopefully see you all soon when we're out of this situation. Goodbye, everyone.